G'day guys and welcome back to your English Aussie. Today we're going to go through a Game Week 8 review of all the Premier League games played this weekend, including the singular game played on Sunday, which of course was Aston Villa versus Tottenham. Then we're going to go on to my Game Week 9 transfer plans and also some future plans towards Game Week 16 AFCON 5 free transfers. Don't forget to subscribe, so strap on your boots and let's jump straight into the video. So, first up, we are going to have the goalkeepers for this game week. I did go with David Raya over Martin Dubravka, who did manage to keep a clean sheet for Arsenal. However, only 6 points in comparison to Dubravka's 9. Maybe a little bit of an oversight on how well Burnley managed to defend against Leeds. Leeds were missing, of course, a few key players this week, and this did lead to them really struggling to be an offensive threat. Dominic Calvert-Lewin, as usual, failed to score. One of the players that I do really think has possibly the worst finishing in the Premier League. Leeds, however, have been really good so far this season. Maybe with a few injuries at the moment, are likely to hit a little bit of a rough patch. However, their fixtures are nice for the next few game weeks, so hopefully they can continue to perform for us. David Raya in goal. Again, Arsenal probably the best defence in the league. David Raya consistently picking up those 4 points for the clean sheet, although often doesn't get those save points due to Arsenal not conceding too many chances throughout the game. I think is still a really nice pick at 5.5 million, especially considering we don't need to stretch our budget too far this year with there being so many nice mid-price picks. Into the defence, we do have VVD, Lacroix, Senesi and Calafiori. Obviously, Virgil van Dijk did not play this week, so nothing much to talk about with him. Just kidding. So in the game, it was really evident for Liverpool that Manchester United did something that teams really haven't done against Liverpool so far this season, other than Bournemouth in the first game of the season, and that was to really run the ball at their back two of Konate and Van Dijk. What we've seen in previous games is that strikers such as Mateta have been pinning themselves to Konate, who's been struggling in some of the more aerial duels and physical duels with these bigger, stronger strikers. And VVD's been sort of covering in behind, and they haven't looked to pin themselves to him. This week, what I found really interesting is that Man United packed their team full of ball carriers, runners, people who are going to run in behind, cause problems, run the channels, and really turn Van Dijk and Konate and get them running backwards towards their own goal. You saw that early on where Van Dijk, I'm really not sure what he was doing for that first goal. Looked like he'd sort of passed on Mbeumo to Konate. Just neither of them were in the right decision. And you can really see that this new Liverpool back four has not been gelling together very well so far this season. As I've said, like coming from a background, playing actually at fullback in the past for some pretty decent sides, it does take time for the defence to gel together, especially a new defence, to understand each other, to know what positions they should be in. However, the mistakes that I'm seeing from Van Dijk and Konate are just a little bit out of character for the two of them, who last season had such a good understanding. And maybe it is to do with having the new fullbacks in, and they're struggling to know whether to go out wide, help the fullback out, whether to stay inside, and make sure the fullback is covering. And it seems to just be taking a little bit of time for that Liverpool back four to really gel together well. I think Van Dijk's defending was really poor, and he does struggle when you are getting players to really run at him. And it's almost the opposite for Konate, as he tends to struggle in some of the more physical duels. So as I was saying sort of last week, I thought potentially teams were going to look to pin themselves up against Konate. That would probably lead to him having more defensive contributions than Van Dijk. However, United sort of flipped the script this week and went for, we're going to have a lot of ball carriers, a lot of runners, and we're going to run at Van Dijk. For me, and this might be a very controversial opinion, I don't think you can put him in there with some of the greats of the centre-back era. I think he's got a lot of holes in his game, and he really needs to improve this season if Liverpool are going to be title contenders. I do expect that Liverpool defence to start to improve and to get better. I still think they're going to keep plenty of clean sheets this season. but they can't afford to be making those defensive errors, especially early in the games at Anfield, where one of the strengths that Liverpool have is starting strong, getting that crowd behind them, and really putting pressure on the opposition team. Man United really dented that this week, scored that early goal at Anfield, which is very crucial for all teams visiting, and then continued to play really well. Liverpool, again, just not moving the ball quick enough, and it wasn't really until Ekitike came on that they did start looking a better team. For me, Salah really not been performing well so far this season, and maybe we'll go on to talk about some of the Liverpool midfield a little bit later, but I really think Gakpo is the best Liverpool midfielder, and to be honest, Ekitike has been far and away our best striker and should be starting over Isak at this time. And Ekitike's got, and Isak needs to earn his place in this side because I really do think Ekitike started so well. Moving on to United now, I thought Bruno Fernandes again made me think with this upcoming run of fixtures for Man United now with Brighton, Nottingham Forest, Tottenham, Everton, Palace, and then West Ham and Wolves, and also Bournemouth all the way into game week 16. I think Bruno Fernandes really could be a pick to go into over that fixture run. The fact that he's just able to pick up points from so many different avenues, penalties, assists, defensive contributions. He's just a man that's able to get those points in so many different ways, and we might be having a very different conversation about Bruno Fernandes if he had scored both his penalties this season. He would be the second top scoring midfielder in FPL. So for me, definitely someone to consider as we go forwards. The rest of the Man United offence, obviously you see a bit of rotation from Amorim. Clearly a tactical switch to not go with Sesko and to have Cunha and Mbeumo, Fernandes, Mount all playing together to be able to have that ball carrying. It did work against Liverpool, but for me, I don't really like the rest of that United offence. I don't feel like they have multiple routes to points. I don't think they're going to score a huge amount of goals. However, maybe this is a stepping stone for United to start to become a little bit more confident and a little bit better. So time will tell for the rest of those players. So next up in the defence, we got Maxime Lacroix of Crystal Palace. Now, this is someone that I've been looking really closely at Crystal Palace recently, and I think that if you are to go for a Palace defender right now, I would be going for Daniel Munoz. I think, and I was hoping that he wouldn't return this week because I think that he is going to explode for a really big game week very soon. Maybe a 14, 15, 17 pointer. I can definitely see it coming. 1 goal, a clean sheet, maybe some defensive contribution points, and he'll be up at 17 pointer, similar to Mukiele for Sunderland this week, who, if you guys were on my live stream, I was advising the majority of you on wildcards to bring in Mukiele. And hopefully a couple of you, I know that I said you should start him, did start him this week for his 17-point haul for Sunderland. I do see Daniel Munoz as someone who could potentially be picking those up. He might not get the defensive contributions as consistently as Richards and Lacroix, who didn't manage to get it this week, but I think he can pick it up here and there, and his attacking threat is just brilliant for Palace, that he's going to have some very, very big hauls on the horizon. Senesi for Bournemouth. Again, I think he's someone that I would keep in the team. He continues to pick up those defensive contributions. Unfortunately, picked up a yellow card, conceded 3 goals. So just the 2 points, but still is going to continue to tick over those points. And I think 4.9 or 5 million is still a lovely pick and someone that I would keep in that side. Calafiori for Arsenal. Now, I think Arsenal is a really interesting one. If you've been watching those Arsenal games recently, you can see that Calafiori's actually been inverting from that left-back role into central midfield when Arsenal have the ball and got a lot higher up the pitch, actually scored an unbelievable goal against Fulham, and I was cursing my luck that he was slightly offside because he probably would have ended up with a 17-pointer if that goal had gone in. Or maybe a 14, 15 pointer. So very unfortunate there for Calafiori. Had another great chance, which I think was just tipped over the bar. Not sure if the keeper got a hand to it or not. But yeah, looks like he is starting to move into those more central positions, be a little bit more involved in the Arsenal attack. Similar to how Rico Lewis used to invert into that Manchester City central midfield role with Pep, you can see Calafiori's clearly doing that with Arsenal, leaving sort of Saliba and Gabriel at the back. Jurriën Timber, of course, is still pushing on really high for Arsenal. Very attacking, gets into some brilliant areas, links up with Saka really nicely. And then Gabriel is starting slowly to improve in those defensive contributions. I think picked up 8 or 9 again this week. Got the assist for the goal. And is someone that I think if he does start to pick up DEFCON for Arsenal, given the fact that he's nailed in that centre-back role, again, is someone that maybe is now starting to become my favourite pick in that Arsenal defence. A little bit less exciting, but someone that is definitely a big threat for Arsenal. Joe Rodon on the bench, as I've spoken about, I think Mukiele is the best pick at the moment of those 4 million defenders. But Rodon does have some good fixtures coming up for Leeds with West Ham, Brighton and Nottingham Forest over the next 3 game weeks. Into the midfield, and just a reminder to you guys, if you have been enjoying this content so far, please remember to like the channel, smash that subscribe button down below. It does really help small content creators like me continue to produce this good content for you guys. In the midfield, I do have Antoine Semenyo with a 4-pointer for Bournemouth with 1 assist this week. A dubious second assist not being given, but actually, after taking into account all the rules in FPL, I agree that it was correct not to give the assist, given that they concluded that the touch was an inadvertent touch. Now, I think that is definitely something that can be debated. However, the rules of FPL are that an inadvertent touch can be an assist. However, it has to lead directly to the goal. And given that after it hit Semenyo, it flicked off Gueye on the way to Krupi Jr., that means that it didn't lead directly to the goal as it took an additional touch on the way there. Unfortunately, those are the rules, and Semenyo was not given that second assist. However, most of you, if you do have him, probably know that everybody else has him, and it probably would not have made a huge difference to your rank this game week anyway. Kudus in the middle with a 2-pointer. I was looking to bring out Kudus this week. I just ended up rolling the transfer, so I had 2 transfers for game week 9. I think he's definitely someone that I might be looking at bringing out of the team next game week, or potentially an Elliot Anderson. We'll have to wait and see. I think he is good for Spurs. However, he does tend to hug that right-hand touchline. I would like to see him getting into more central areas, getting into the back post when Spurs have it down the left and trying to be in more goal-scoring areas. He is definitely more involved in the play than Brennan Johnson used to be for Spurs on that right-hand side, and still a key figure, a 90-minute man for Spurs. However, I'd just like to see more goal threat from him in the future to keep him in my team. Bukayo Saka, as we've seen, managed to get a 7-pointer with 0 goal or assist contributions, 2 DEFCON, 2 points, 1 clean sheet point, and 2 bonus points for Saka, making up that 7-pointer. He's a no-brainer for me in the side. On penalties for Arsenal, a little bit unlucky not to get a penalty this week. I think it's one that can be debated. Obviously, did get the ball, did go through the knee first to get the ball. Not one for me to be debating. I think to be left up to you guys to say what your opinion was and whether you think that Saka was a penalty or not. Leave me a comment down below if with your thoughts on that and whether you thought that was a penalty or not, because I am interested to hear other people's thoughts. Similar for that Semenyo assist. If you disagree, chuck a comment down below with your thoughts on that one. Enzo obviously was not fit for this game week, but I still think is a really good pick going forward, especially now we have heard that Palmer's out for 6 weeks. Enzo likely to be on penalties for Chelsea. Anderson, again, continues to tick along those defensive contributions with 4-pointer. Ange Postecoglou obviously getting sacked after 5 Premier League games in charge for Nottingham Forest. Devastating for all the Aussies that watch the channel, I'm sure. We all love Ange and do enjoy his press conferences. Think that was a little bit of a tough one to take and a bit unfortunate for him. However, it is a ruthless game out there at the moment, and Nottingham Forest are desperately trying to stay in the Premier League, desperately trying to make a run in Europe. and are going to need something to change quickly for them. Moving on to the forwards, and obviously the main man, Erling Haaland, succeeded again. 2 goals for him, 13 points, doubled to 26 on captaincy. Continues to just be an unbelievable form. This is his highest scoring FPL season so far after 8 game weeks. So if you take that into account of how unbelievable he started in his first year in the Premier League, you really know he's in brilliant form for Manchester City so far this season. And he is just a must-have in your team. If you need to take a hit, if you need to take 2 transfers, if you need to move out Salah, you should do it to make sure you have Haaland in your side. João Pedro, another blank again for Chelsea. Again, I definitely think he's more effective as a number 10, just in behind the striker rather than the striker itself. However, given Chelsea's lack of options up front, he's had to play that number 9 role. We did see when Guiu came on later that Pedro did drop into the 10 and did look much better in that role, with Guiu sort of running in behind and causing those centre-backs to drop off and give João Pedro a little bit more space to work with. And finally, Waldemar up front for Newcastle. Another goal for him. Some really nice fixtures for Newcastle coming up. Fulham, West Ham, Brentford in the next 3, before a few tricky games with Manchester City, Everton and Tottenham. And then from game week 15, the Newcastle run is absolutely exceptional all the way through to 22. So definitely someone you could look at holding all the way through to the second half of the season in big Waldemar. Going on to some forward planning and what I am looking to do for game week 9, I am considering bringing in Bruno Fernandes in here for Mohamed Kudus. And I am also looking to potentially bring in Krupi Jr. for João Pedro. I have been a little bit disappointed with João Pedro of late. As I mentioned, I do think he plays a little bit better in the 10 role, having someone in the 9 to really run in behind the defence and create a little bit of space for him. I am considering whether I think it's worth going for Krupi Jr. 4.5 million or whether a 4.3 bench fodder striker is fine to go for if I would like to save that 0.2 million. I'm thinking Manchester United's fixtures are really good. They have Brighton and Nottingham Forest before a tricky one against Tottenham, Everton and Palace, and then West Ham, Wolves, Bournemouth, Aston Villa on a really nice run all the way through to game week 20 through that AFCON period. I think Bruno Fernandes has many options to points. He can obviously get assists, goals, penalties, on free kicks, on set pieces. Also has that ability to get defensive contributions. Similar in a way to Enzo for me, but he's more of a key cog in that Manchester United side. And I think that he is a really nice option to bring into the team this week. Other players that I have been thinking about bringing in this week are Yankuba Minte of Brighton, Ismail Assar of Crystal Palace. However, I would rather bring him in for game week 10. And also Caicedo of Chelsea to continue to tick along with those defensive contributions, potentially if he is fit, has also managed 3 goals already this season with a good fixture up against Sunderland. And finally, Phil Foden of Manchester City, started the last 3, played 90 minutes in all of them, playing quite nicely for Manchester City despite not having the returns that we would like from Phil. Manchester City do go on an absolute mega fixture run from game week 13 and do have a couple of decent fixtures against Aston Villa and Bournemouth in the next 2 weeks before a couple of tricky ones up against Liverpool and Newcastle. It might be a nice early point to come into Foden before he really starts to kick off and get those big returns we know he is capable of. At the moment, I'm swinging towards Bruno Fernandes. I think that is the transfer I am going to make. In terms of future planning and a little bit further down the line, there are some players that I do really like the look of. Of course, Jean-Philippe Mateta of Crystal Palace after the hat-trick this week. He has been really good for expected goals so far this season, causing opposition defences a lot of trouble. Another player I really like is Daniel Munoz of Crystal Palace. I would really like to get him into my team, and he is definitely someone I am considering bringing in game week 10, even though it's likely a straight swap for Lacroix of Crystal Palace. I do think that Munoz is going to explode at some point in the near future, and I really want to have him in my team for Palace's really nice fixture run from game week 10 forwards. He does have the potential to pick up those defensive contributions as well, although not as regularly as a Chris Richards or a Maxime Lacroix. So he is someone that I am really looking to get in for that game week 10 fixture run. Going forwards and running towards AFCON and those extra 5 free transfers in game week 16, I am looking to roll a few free transfers through to game week 12, game week 13, when those Liverpool-Manchester City fixture runs become really nice. Newcastle become a little bit nicer from 15, and you also have Bournemouth and Aston Villa from game week 12 who have some nice fixtures. I am planning to centre my team around those sort of players: Newcastle, Bournemouth, Liverpool, Manchester City, and potentially Morgan Rogers does become an option later down the line if he keeps this nice form going for Aston Villa. Obviously, Crystal Palace from game week 10 looked nice. And then just a reminder for you guys, in game week 15, however many free transfers you have remaining, make sure to use all of them. Your free transfers will be topped up to 5 free transfers in game week 16 to use during that AFCON break. That is really important. If you don't use those free transfers, they will just be gone. You'll have 5 no matter what transfers you have rolled through in game week 15. So use all of those transfers you have left over in game week 15. And then game week 16, you will have 5 free transfers no matter what. Potentially, you can look to even make a goalkeeper transfer at this point if there is somebody that you'd like to bring in and you've got a couple of spare transfers to use. That's pretty much all from me. Thanks so much if you have watched all the way through. Please remember to give a like to the channel and subscribe down below if you have enjoyed this content. It does really help small content creators like me continue to make inroads, continue to pull in additional viewers and keep making this content for you guys. Thank you so much for watching. This has been your English Aussie, and have a fantastic week, everyone.